So I'm going to talk today about three topics that are the most neglected topics in nutrition. And that was true when I began to become interested in them, but I think it's also still true now. And so, but I'll start with letting you know how I got there, because it was not an easy trip. I was born during the Second World War in Europe, and we were refugees. I was 2.5 years old, and we were fleeing from Soviet tanks and trucks. And the Allies were using us as target practice, shooting at us from planes. So this was on a dirt road in horse-drawn hay wagons, mostly mothers with young children. And I don't remember a lot except anxiety, fear, didn't know what I could trust. Nothing was stable. It's not exactly the place where you want your kids to grow up. And I carried that anxiety with me a lot. And I did a lot of reading when I was a kid because reading was safe. And my parents had, because they had gone through the First World War, the Bolshevik Revolution, then the Depression, then the Second World War. They basically told us we should question everything. So I was really good at that. In 1948, I was 6 years old, and it occurred to me that when people were arguing, that there must be a better way to live, and I was going to find out how. And that's been my driver all my life. 1952, we emigrated from Europe to Canada, started over. I grew up mostly on farms. We had one farm in the wilderness where there was no running water, no indoor plumbing. We had an outhouse that you got to visit at 40 below. So I became very familiar with nature. And then in 1959, I started going to university, and in the service of trying to understand how things work so that we could live better, I started in science to understand how things work. Then I went to bioscience to find out how creatures work. Then I started into psychology to understand how thinking works. Then I got into medicine because I wanted to learn about health, but I left after a year because I was only learning about disease. And the dean told me, when I asked him what health is, he said, "We don't know, we're working on it." And I realized that in biology, you learn more about health than you do in medicine. And I went back in and did grad studies in biochemistry and genetics. Then when the geneticists began to talk about cloning people, I thought, no, I don't think this is for me. And I left. And then 1968 is when I left, and I traveled, did some social exploration, got into self-knowledge, and then I did work, many jobs, mostly blue-collar work, because I wanted to understand what it felt like to be in the shoes of the people doing them. 1980, as part of one of those jobs, I was poisoned by pesticides. I was very careless, and there was no medical solution for it. When I asked the doctor, "What do you have for pesticide poisoning?" she gave me the beautiful one-word answer, "Nothing." And at that point, I realized that my health is my responsibility. And because I had the background, I started looking in the journals on health and nutrition, disease and nutrition. And I learned a lot. I was looking at everything, minerals and vitamins and amino acids and everything. And I got part of it was the body is made by solar energy using a genetic program that it created over eons from air, water, and food. And the body's made for activity. And there's a constant turnover of the body. Some people say it's 98% of the atoms in your body this year, right now, will have been removed and replaced if we get together again at this time next year. 98%. And that's why healing is possible, because we're a major construction site, always under construction. So if we raise the standard of the input, which is food, water, and air, then within 1 year, we can have rebuilt the body to a higher standard. That's what healing is. And then when I was doing the studying, I got focused on fats because it was the most confusing area in nutrition, and sometimes confusion gets your attention. And one of the big surprises I got is that I read research that said omega-6, which is an essential fatty acid, is essential. And then right next to it was a study that said, oh, omega-6 gives you cancer and kills you. I was like, what? It's essential for health and then it kills you? And it was that conflict, that contradiction, that made me look deeper into the whole area. And then I got my second big surprise, which is that I found out how oils are made by industry and found out that they're damaged 0.5 to 1% during that processing. And I got pretty excited because it's like, really? So I called the oil industry expert at the American Oil Chemist Society and asked them to give me a researcher. I wanted to talk to him. So I asked this researcher, well, when you know it does damage, why do you do it? So he said to me, well, one reason we do it is we can get rid of 50% of the pesticide in oils when we treat them that way. And I'd been poisoned by pesticides. So in my head, I'm saying, oh my God, 50% of the pesticides stay in the oil. I didn't even know there were pesticides in the oil. And so I said to him, well, why don't you start with organically grown seeds? And there was a long silence. And he said nothing, and I said nothing. And when he came back, he was mad. He said, I don't know what your problem is. It's only 1% damaged, and it's 99% good. And if you get 99% on the exam, you'd be damn happy, wouldn't you? So now I'm backing off. I said, well, maybe I'm overreacting. So then we have a saying, when in doubt, do the math. So I did the math. And the question I asked is, if you have a tablespoon of an oil that has been damaged 1% by the processing, how many damaged molecules would you find in that tablespoon? And I ask, when I do live lectures, I always ask people, guess, because you don't know, right? I mean, you're guessing. But the guesses I get are always at least 1 billion times lower than the actual damage. And the actual number of molecules in a tablespoon of oil that's 1% damage is 60 quintillion damaged molecules. That's a 6 followed by 19 zeros. And that's more than 1 million damaged molecules for every one of your body's 60 trillion cells. That's in 1 tablespoon. Most of us take 2 to 4, depending on size and weight. And so you have to multiply that number, the million plus by 2 to 4. And then if we use the oils for frying, then we damage them with light, oxygen, and heat all at the same time. So you got to multiply that number by 3 to 6 again. So an enormous amount of damaged molecules goes into our body from oils that have been damaged by processing and damaged by food preparation.